Councilman Osborne, and I believe, I'm sorry, thank you for correcting me, Vice Mayor Osborne. City Manager, have you heard anything more?
Not since this morning's email that she might not be able to make
That she might not be able to be here, so.
family illness.
Okay, all right, great. So the first agenda,
To excuse her?
excuse me, not at a work session,
work session,
at the regular meeting, okay? And I'll be happy to ask you to do that. First item on the agenda is the Citizen Satisfaction Survey. So Paula, if you will present.
Thank you, Mayor. I laid it before you, and I didn't get it to you sooner because I was actually working on it all weekend.
I'm sorry,
In order-
we can't hear you. Can you
I
push
said
that
I
microphone?
didn't get it to you sooner because I was actually working on it all weekend.
Oh.
We wanted to get it on an agenda as soon as we could because of the bulk trash issue. And so in order to do that, we just, the minute the data came in, we put it on the agenda.
We appreciate that.
Okay. So I'd like to start by just giving you a brief history. And we have done this survey for 4 years now with behavior research. And we try to do it every 2 years. That's what it's basically budgeted for. In this case, we went just a little earlier than we normally do. We were going to go in early January, but because we wanted the bulk trash issue answered as soon as possible, we went in late 11. So you will find that this one is called the 2012 survey because it's for this
Okay.
11-12 fiscal year. There was 22 months in between both surveys. We do 400, we've always done 400 random telephone surveys, and that gives us a 95% confidence level. Now, what that means is, if someone went out and surveyed every single household, at the same time we're surveying 400, that they're 95% positive that the answers would be the same. So when we see a 5% difference, because we didn't look at every single household, we're not going to assume that that is a meaningful difference. It has to be over 6%, 6% or over. When it gets to the subsamples of the, whether it's male, female, or by age or by area, then it needs to be higher because those are much smaller samples. It has to be at least 10%. This is going normal.
Push it again. Eddie, can you move that forward one?
Okay, there.
Thank you.
Never mind. Okay, this is the area that was of this of the city, and we call north between Camelback and I-10. The central area is south of the freeway to Gila River, and the central area. South is south of the Gila. So the basic sample sizes are pretty similar to the amount of households in each area. We oversampled the south a bit because it's only 15% of the population, and we did 19%, and still that's only 73 households. So just to give you this table is just to show you an example of how the sampling error works. The first one is the total sample, which is based on 400. So you'll see that that with this is definitely more than 6% difference. Therefore, this is a significant difference. It's significantly higher this year than last year. In the subsamples, male-female, it's only 9% difference. You need at least 10, so that's not significantly different. But when you look at the this one, where you're looking at the area, central versus north, that's a significant difference because it's 12%. Okay? Just sample table. All right. First, we're going to look at our respondents and look at the demographics of our households. And basically, we still have maintained our high education levels, 83% college educated. That was 85 last year, so that's really the same. College graduates, it was 56% last year, now it's 60, where you'll see the difference in the next slide is it's in the graduate degrees. We have significantly more households with graduate degrees than we did before. The total college educated has stayed the same, as you can see, overall 4 years. The length of occupancy, this is just interesting to find out that now 62% of our population has lived here more than 5 years. But when we first did this in 2004, it was the opposite. 69% of our citizens had lived here 5 years or less. The employment status, as you can see on this one, there's definitely been a difference since the first 2004. It's been and in 2010, which is the yellow color on all of these slides, the lowest employment, going down steadily to 2010, as you see, coming back up now. And look at the employment number was extremely high. Our city average never hit anything near the 13%. It was always around 6%. But so a lot of the people that we find at home, found at home last year, were probably unemployed.
Let me just if I'm reading it, if I'm reading this correctly, go back to that slide there. Does that mean we're getting more retired people within our community? At
yeah,
the 50% are now.
This is
employed?
let me address this too. Where you see that in the first two surveys, your retirement level was the same here. Now, all of a sudden, when the recession hit, your retirement went way up. Well, this is probably some people who were laid off, just said, I'm going to choose to retire. And you have the same level now, and now you've got the baby boomers hitting. So yes, it probably will start going up.
Well, the only reason why I'm trying to draw that conclusion, you have the employed at 50%, which is actually, a little up from what it was a year before, but the unemployed is going down. So if they're unemployed and the employed is kind of hovering around the same, then the difference has to be, at least the conclusion I'm drawing is they've got to be retiring.
And as the spouses of those who weren't answering the phone, you can see that stayed about the same, about 67, 69% employed.
Paula? Was the survey done actually done in 2010, or was it done in 2009, reported in 10?
It was in early 10, January of 10.
Okay, so we're really like 18,
It was
20 months? Between?
22 months.
Okay.
Okay, working households. This is good and bad. The first set of bars shows you that the none employed, the household heads, none employed in Goodyear. That's the highest bar. 70% of our households have no one employed in Goodyear. The good news is, though, that was 76% last year, so that is significantly lower this year. As you see, was significantly different, more people who did get jobs. So that hopefully that number will keep going down and we'll employ more of our people.
I'm sorry, what's the 1 and the 2 mean for that?
Oh, I'm sorry. One person in the home, one person employed in the home, one head of household, and this is both heads of household employed in the home in Goodyear. On the commuting miles, we still are averaging around 77 to 80 in people who are commuting more than 20 miles round trip. That hasn't changed since 2004. Those people who are commuting 40 miles round trip is about 40%. That was the same in 2010, but the good news is it seems like a lot of people are finding jobs closer because that number was 50% in both 2004 and 2007. So I'm sure in those years there have been more jobs created in the West Valley and people are finding them. The annual income, about a third of the people usually refuse to answer about their income. Those with households earning over $75,000 is significantly higher than it was in 2010 and 2007 when it was 47%. And you were asking if the households were older and more retired. It looks like since 2004, we have, in some of the households that we brought in, we've gained more households with no children. That number is going up significantly since 2004. And then those houses that do have children, the age group of the children isn't as young as it used to be. 84% of the survey respondents were registered voters and 88% of their spouses. So we looked at a profile of those, and basically, the older the population, the more likely they are to be a registered voter. The longer they've lived here, naturally, the more likely they are to register, but there is no difference by area of the city.
That's interesting.
Okay, so that's sort of a picture of our citizens at this stage. Now we're going to go into the questions we asked them about quality of life. So we ask, and the questions are all in blue at the top if you want to know exactly what the question was. So this is looking at how Goodyear is as a place to live. And the ones who gave us excellent and good ratings, it's still very high, actually higher than last year, 94%. This has always stayed in the 90s. And the North has always been very high on this. In the past, we've seen the central area was low in comparison to North and South. This is very interesting. When we have a significant increase in the central area and their satisfaction with the city, and at the same time, we have a significant decrease in the South.
That's concerning.
Do we know?
Sherry, I think you aren't close enough.
I'm sorry. Do we know from some of the questions the specifics why that drop? I know it's not statistically your 10%, but still, it is kind of a.
It's pretty low.
And it's a fall off. It's not just a couple down. Do we have any idea what specifics or? With the question?
There's problems throughout here, as you'll see, with the South being lower that Paula and I were talking about today. How can we get at those? And we will be bringing some ideas back to you because it definitely points up a problem that we have an area of the community that feels differently towards the community than the rest of the
Maybe
community.
we need a town hall meeting up in that area. You know, that might help.
Okay.
When we ask about the neighborhood quality of life, that has always rated lower, pretty much, than the quality of life for the city as a whole. But back in 2004, they were very similar. Quality of life in the neighborhood was 90 as well. But over the years, you see that it's gone down significantly since 2004, so now we're in the low 80s. The other difference to look at is that back in 2004, there were more excellent, of other people who had positive things to say, there were more excellent than good. Now it's switched. There are more saying it's good than are saying excellent. We want the excellent to be the main answer.
Do you think it's the turn in the housing market because neighborhoods changed significantly? You know, there was overgrown grass, weeds, not grass.
I think it's directly related
Yeah.
to that because our code enforcement has increased significantly at the same time that these statistics are coming in. So.
All right.
You'll find later on where the economy, the time, has a great influence on the answers to the questions.
Gary, do you have something?
This is a question, this is one of our standard questions that we've asked.
Yes.
Same question for surveys in a row.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
If we didn't ask the exact same question, we can't compare it. So you want to see where the differences lie. As we said before, Central was consistently low, but now, again, when it comes to neighborhood, we definitely see a difference in the South again. And when I looked, I tried to see where is it coming from, age. Look at the difference in age. The younger people definitely have our rating is positive less than the other age groups.
Interesting.
When we ask what open-ended, what is the most important problem facing the city of Goodyear, the good news is that at least 11% said nothing. You know, everything's fine. That's a good trend. The biggest problem, foreclosures. So it's not really so obviously it's the economy in their mind, not something we can really do something about. But the other one, which is sort of negative, is the fact that you see in 2007, crime was one of the biggest, and then it went way back to 7% last year, and now it's back up to 12. So,
And yet our crime rate
and our crime rate is down.
Crime
It's
rate's
lower.
down, though,
Right,
right?
it's lower. Right.
It's just the perception right now.
And that's what I'm thinking. It is definitely just perception from that standpoint.
Do we know which neighborhoods rated the crime issue?
Well, these are so few people. When it's 12%, no, you don't. You could say whether it's north, south, but you don't know what neighborhood. And it's so few
Well, that's
people.
what I meant. Can you tell us north or south, or is it all up at south of the Gila River?
I can look
Yeah,
at that.
we may need to know that.
Well, I think also, when this survey went out, there was a couple incidences up south of the river with people trying to possibly abduct children. So there was a lot of
Yeah, that
talk.
might be it.
So that might be something that kind of skewed them a little bit. And there was a break-in and a couple thefts and
Was
stuff.
that when the garage doors were being dented in and that type
There
of
was
thing?
a lot of
Okay.
stuff
Yeah.
going on.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So it may
thank you.
be a little off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the other ones that was significantly lower was that, last year, they thought that city budget problems were the number one issue. This year, that's very low. It's at only 6%. So everybody, they're changing as to what they're thinking about. Unfortunately, we don't want that to be crime, but.
No, you're right.
Okay, so then we ask, well, then how do you make the city more livable? 25% said, it's fine. You don't have to do anything to make it more livable. But the usual answer, the highest answer has been, and probably will stay, more parks and recreation. When they said improve city services, a lot of inclusion in that was bring a library. But it's a multitude of things. It's many, many things in there. Bring more jobs, bring more dining. As you see, back in 2007, roads were really important to them. As you can see now, obviously, we fixed a lot of roads in the meantime, including I-10, so roads aren't high on their list.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Do we have if you look at the reduced crime,
Yeah.
I mean, that's dropped it's dropped to 4%, and yet on the other slide, we have the perception is that crime is a problem, and yet when you ask the question of how do you make the city more livable, they don't say reduce crime, yet they think that there's crime in the city. I mean,
Well, it depends on how
Well,
you.
it depends on how much, what you're thinking about is like, what is the key thing that makes it,
How you define it.
yeah,
Everybody
what is
defines
crime
it a
to
little
you?
bit
It's like, well, I want to live in a
This
place with
question.
none, but what I really want is parks for my kids.
Yeah.
If they can give multiple answers on these, though. They probe. After they give one answer, they say, is there anything else? We also ask what they feel the city has done when it comes to balancing the budget. And it was 58% last year. We're positive on this. This year, 61%. You could almost say that, if they've done a fair job, that's not at least negative. But looking at strictly who said you did a good job or excellent job, 61%. And was there anybody among the subsamples? Well, yes, it was significantly higher among the younger people, feeling that we did a good job on that. In the people who had lived here fewer years, and there was significantly low number in the South who rated as positive. So there's definitely an attitudinal difference in the southern area.
But we're not quite sure what exactly that is, South.
No.
well, it depends on who they asked.
Well, there isn't that much
Even though
south.
it's
You have the
random.
Gila River,
Right.
It's a straight
Estrella.
It's Estrella. So I guess the question is
And Cantamia.
Well, that's
part
in
of
Estrella.
Estrella.
Rainbow Valley. But it does give us some great tools that we can start looking at now and
Absolutely.
breaking down.
Absolutely.
If we're having meetings or we're having focus groups or something like that, we know what areas we need to start asking about.
And I'll be honest, that's what I hear. I mean, that is the comments I get, at the grocery store, at the bagel store. That's the type of comments I get. So I think your number, I don't know what's causing it, but I think the number's probably right.
But we
That's
need
what
to
people
band
say.
together and go up there, and we need to work it. Okay? Answer questions and find out why they're feeling that way.
Okay, we asked about the half-cent sales tax, and we were very specific, and I want to go ahead and read how we asked that. I can't read it from there, so thank you. We said, in September 2009, the City Council voted to temporarily increase the city's sales tax by a half cent to help maintain our level of services due to expected shortfalls in the city's operating revenues. This is equivalent to adding a nickel to every $10 spent in the city. The City Council also voted to consider removing this tax after 3 years. Which of the following statements best reflects your feelings about removing the tax increase? So these were the 3 statements. They were rotated among the respondents. They weren't asked in the same order every time. So one was, make every effort should be made to remove this tax before the 3 years is up. It's important to remove the tax at 3 years, no matter what state the economy is in. And the other is, it's important to remove the tax, but not until the economy is stable enough to maintain service. So obviously the last one was the majority of the people, but it was still make sure you take it off
But it's
eventually.
63%.
Right.
And I see your red blurb against the
Yes,
South.
more when I looked at the subsamples, women far more than men felt that it should be taken off right away.
Was that
And
an
the
option
South
for
area.
them? Was that given to them as an option to answer?
What do you?
Well, you said you asked this
Yes,
question, this
all
one,
three.
and
They
this
had
one.
all three.
Yeah, 3
Was a
choices.
choice. They said, which of these 3 statements do you agree with the most? And so they read the 3 statements, and then this is what they voted
Yeah,
yes to.
the ones that didn't say that, they're the ones that said, I want it gone now.
No, of the ones that are pretty much in the 20% category.
Oh, got it.
That is more women than men,
Okay.
and far more
Thank you.
residents in
Okay.
the South area than any other area of the city.
Paula, real quick on the ones, because you mentioned, I guess, down south, is there any question, maybe it'll come up in the survey, where services they would like to remove as a result of getting rid of the tax? Is there anything along?
I don't think we ever asked you something you want to remove, and that didn't come up, because we really only ask about things that they might want to see added. So
Okay, I'm just curious.
that, I would say that's the thing that if you're talking one-on-one or in small groups, and those are the kind of things we can do focus groups on. There's other types of research that can be done besides the random telephone.
Bill?
Paul, can we get this broken down? North, central, south?
Yes, I can give you the exact, for each of these.
Yeah,
Yes.
for this particular slide.
Yes.
Thanks.
We also said that now if the city council felt revenues were still too low to take the entire half-cent sales tax off after 3 years, but could consider lowering a portion of various sales tax, which one of the following taxes would be most beneficial to you if it were lowered? And that's, of course, we came out to 2/3 said the supermarket tax, which is the one we've already considered. Now, services, the overall satisfaction level with services, as you can see, is basically, and after a recession and after we've cut some of our services, still is just as high as it was before. And there are basically no differences here. If you think you'll have to read what you have before you because I don't think you can read that. The top red-rated services have not changed. They basically are always the same.
I think you ought to name those services because somebody's on television. I mean,
It's our basic services of trash, fire, and police. So the highest one, 9.1, is weekly curbside trash, followed by weekly curbside recycling, then paramedic services, fire protection, twice monthly bulk trash, police protection. At this point, we're at 8.3 out of 10. The cleanliness of our parks, and the ballpark services and events. All those were rated 8.3 to 9.1. So it's on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. Those that are very good is the amount of water pressure, stormwater runoff on major streets, followed by condition of park landscaping, playgrounds, and equipment, recreation programs and events, communication with residents, neighborhood street repair, requiring property owners to meet city code standards. Now, we've said that might be a problem. That's 7.5, so they feel we're doing a pretty good job. Amount of large community parks, 7.5. Street construction, traffic congestion on major streets, and then art and cultural events at 7.1. There's a difference then, and I rated the others. 5 would be average and right in the middle. So above average is, but always the lowest, unfortunately for me, is attracting quality jobs to our community and water quality.
Don't you think, when you think about that, if you look at the number of college educated and maybe more
Yes.
high-end jobs that they'd like
Right.
a corporate headquarters, I think that's,
And I would like to attract
yes,
those too.
I know you would. I know you're working on that too. Thank you.
Okay, the next chart, if you would, is really not to look so much at the individual numbers, but across the top first is to look and see where we were. 2004, we had a good economy going. In 2007, we were absolutely booming. In 10, we were in a deep recession when we took this survey, and now we're in slowly recovering. So this is the top, these are the top rated services. Just take a look at the arrows, and that's where you see the pattern, how the economy and the state of the economy can affect people's attitudes. So in 2004 to 2007, most of those arrows are going upwards. From 2007 to 2010, those arrows are pretty much coming down. Then now, from 2010, everything's coming back up. Now, those aren't big significant differences. It's just a general trend. And the same, these are for the other half of the services. Just look at the arrows. You see the differences going up, going down, going back up. The only difference was in between 7 and 10, and it was on road construction, and suddenly in 2010 they were happy. I think that's because I-10 was done, and we'd done Estrella, Van Buren, we'd done a lot of streets in that length of time.
Yeah, I'd like just an observation on the quality of water issue, that Liberty is at 7.4, and, Goodyear water is 5.3. That's, overall rating, I think, is significant. It's all coming out of the same place.
No, you've got up to show you've got a lot of salt.
It is,
I mean,
it is
there's
coming
no
out.
comparison.
The aquifers are actually in the mountain, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they do have a salt problem. up
Thanks for
there.
indulging me.
North
okay.
of the RID canal is
It's all right.
much better water than south of the RID canal.
We were worried last year about people's experience at the city because those numbers went down, and we weren't used to that. So again, about a third of the population has contacted the city in some way this year, and we're happy to say that on both being treated courteously and on timely, in a timely manner, have both increased greatly. So hopefully we're doing a better job with our citizens.
And we assume that those are also related to the economic conditions.
Because of all that's happened this year and the amount of media we've gotten about the police department, we thought it'd be a good idea to ask about the confidence level in the police department so a new police chief will know where he's starting from. So we asked the question, how would you rate overall your confidence in the Goodyear Police Department at this time? So compared to other years, 83% were positive. Actually, 25% or higher said it's higher. So I think that's a really great job in what the city's done. And when you look at demographic differences, there was really only one difference in the amount of people who said positive, and that was difference between the South and the other areas. Follow that up with neighborhood safety. For a city that's almost doubled its size since 2004, I think it's remarkable that we're still at 98% who feel very safe in their community during the day, and as high as 93% in the evening. I think that speaks volumes. Even though they said crime is the biggest problem. Okay, this is the big issue that we moved this up for in order to determine bulk trash. Basically, this shows that only 15% of the current population is using the current system, bulk trash 2 times a month, which is what we offer. So we're looking at going to once a month. Right now, 85% are using the bulk trash once a month or less. Over half of our population are using it less than once a month right now. So we specifically asked the question, we said, fee-based services in Goodyear must cover all of their costs in order to be self-sustaining. It appears that it will be necessary to add $1.36 to each household's monthly trash bill to cover the increasing cost of picking up bulk trash twice a month. If the bulk trash services were reduced to only once a month, there would be no need for a price increase. Based on this information, which of the following would be your preference? Go to once a month with no immediate price increase, or versus maintain 2 times a month with $1.36 per month increase. So as you see in green, that was the answer. 78% said go to once a month bulk trash pickup, so there will be no price increase in the next year or so.
Gee, that makes it easy now, doesn't it?
Well, I
Pretty
suspect
definitive answer.
there's still an increase to cover the cost because the 136 does not cover the 6% that was passed through, for gas. So yeah, all you'll do is you won't have to raise it $1.36. So whatever it was, you get to reduce it by $1.36. What I don't hope we're not misleading is that as a result of going to ones, there's no increase, because I don't think you can do that and cover your costs. So
That was my understanding.
am I wrong on that?
No, I don't think there is. There will be a slight increase,
Right.
even without.
Right.
Did we make that known in the last time we discussed this?
I think we did very clearly in the time we discussed it. It would be small, but there's always the question, and we don't know how much it will be because there's also, as we are redesigning our system, there will be less equipment and there will be less things, so we aren't sure what it will be actually.
At the time we asked this, and I talked to Charles, it was that there wouldn't be any increase.
Well, you remember, we're going 2
Immediate.
periods now because we missed the first 6% increase, and now I'm sure there'll be another increase, so this is.
Coming in
this
next
is a-
month.
This is a 2
You're right,
period.
we're in
so
the second
we're in the
increase
second-
now,
Second
aren't we?
piece,
Okay.
so, since we didn't raise it the first time, so,
So we absorbed that first one?
yes.
Okay.
I hope that when we do raise it, the folks that took this survey won't feel that they were misled, thinking there was not going to be any increase.
Well, I think this tells you they just didn't want to pay the $1.36.
And we did say that the city would take care of that,
Yeah.
that
so-
first one. That was quite clear.
Well, even half the
For
people
6
who,
months, I think it
half of the
was.
people who are using the service, there's only 15% using, and half of those were willing to go to once a month.
Yeah.
So I think your numbers of usage over once a month are enough to make a decision on. It's been consistent. These numbers have not changed in 8 years. So,
And I think we just have to educate, especially the South, because I think that so that they don't feel like, oh, well, what'd you do? Because although most people don't use it, it's in the summertime when people are cutting everything, so we can kind of give them some heads up so they can plan.
Yeah, because my recollection is when we had a problem before, when we changed, it was the South.
It was, yeah.
People don't use it.
well, another problem we changed before was it was a lot more complicated in how and when it would be done.
It was definitely,
That's true.
yes.
I had to try to explain it to the public. Trust me, it was very hard to explain.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, since we spend money on the InFocus, we wanted to find out for sure whether the readership was doing, and it's interesting that the readership has increased significantly since 2010 by 10%, and we found that 59% read every issue. The other significant thing is that the fewest readers are in the South and among non-voters and males.
That
I
makes sense.
suggested we might accept beer ads and
I think it's because they go on the internet, you know. I think that age group and that,
think you're
and
right.
probably can do it away from
And
home.
I have to force my husband to read it, and it's like, read this, you know. So.
So,
Also, we know that everybody's on the internet, so we wanted to check on internet. And interestingly enough, look, 2004, 7, and 10, we were in the 80s as to people with access to internet. Look at the difference, significant jump now to 94. Obviously, the cost of computers, et cetera, have come down, and now pretty much we're at saturation to the level of the most communities that are highly technical. So 70% of those have visited our website, and we asked another question. 88% find it easy to navigate. We also wanted to know a little bit about the ballpark, and so we asked on a scale of 1 to 10 whether the ballpark and its practice fields have added to the quality of life in Goodyear. And the overall me rating there was 7.6, with 64% of the people basically rating it over, 7 or above, and there were no demographic differences at all. And we asked about attendance at the ballpark. 34% of the respondents had not attended an event at the ballpark. And if you look at that, there's another difference where there again, the most people who hadn't attended were in the South. Oh, I'm sorry. One more. Sorry. Here, I'm looking at mine and not turning those. And over half have attended spring training and city market, and again, a third of our population.
I'm really surprised about the South not, do they have a higher population and young people, young children in the South versus the?
Well, I think what you find also is a lot of times there's so much stuff going on up there, either with people with
With
kids.
that
They've
community.
got their own, like their home plate, their holiday thing was the same time as our home plate from the holidays, just earlier that day. It was on the same day again. People have their own sporting events and stuff, so they don't always make it to some of these other events. I know that's one thing. If you've got the kids, soccer game, you're going to go there, and you'll probably not make it to the spring training game.
Maybe we want to be checking on those dates next year and collaborate with them so we don't have that.
We used to do that.
We used to do that.
it's
We used to
strange.
Tried
contact
to
all
make
the
sure they weren't in the
developments and
same
find
dates.
out. So maybe we should focus on that for next year.
Okay, then we ask about providing new city services, and we've asked that before, past 3 years. Some of them we've added after-school programs, again, the highest. Joanne will be happy to hear that. Connecting buses to the valley, door-to-door buses, and circulators. The Multi-Gen Center now, even though it went down last year, I think last year it looked like, with the economy, or last survey, with the economy, when things are so bad and you're asking people what would you like to see built, they're sort of like, oh, like really. So I think now that things are looking a little better, that they're coming back and saying, now I'd like an aquatic center, I'd like a multi-gen. And which new amenities would improve their quality of life the most? This is the first year we asked them about bringing higher education to the city, and that turned out to be the highest answer, 65%. Again, as usual, the freestanding library, bringing them all. Those are the important things to people. And because of the higher education, we had asked in the past 2 years, interest in getting a college degree. It has gone down significantly this year, and before it was usually among the younger population. And now it appears that the degrees changed. Before last year in the yellow, you see it was associates and bachelors were the most desired, and now in the red, it's the masters and doctorates. So it looks like some of the older people maybe are deciding they want to get more educated. So
I think it's also the economy, because so many folks, if you have just a bachelor's, they're hiring the masters and the doctorates because everybody's so competitive, because jobs are so scarce.
the areas of interest again still are healthcare is the most, followed by computer tech, business, and liberal arts.
Interesting.
A couple just odd
Although
exams,
engineering
questions.
is pretty close to
Yeah.
liberal arts.
Yes.
If you're looking at that.
We had asked this question in past years, and we wanted to just ask it again. Even though we really haven't built much in the city in the past year, we just ask overall, how would you rate the design of our commercial centers versus what you see in other areas? And interestingly enough, it came in significantly lower this year. So I don't have an answer for you on that, but that is interesting to know. I think we improved our design guidelines earlier this year, so maybe it was good that we did that.
Maybe they're thinking lack of shopping center.
And we ask again about how much art defines a community, and that's very similar. The answers were the same. The only basic, it's 40% of the people say it defines it a lot, with about 30% saying some. The only demographic difference that I found was on length of residency, and those who lived here longer than feel that it really defines it a lot more than those who haven't been here. So I just want to point out sort of a summary. Overall quality of life, it's 94% is extremely good comparison to other city surveys that I've heard where it's a quality place to live. Neighborhood, as we said, was down to 84, with the central area showing improvement, but the south showing a problem and something we need to look at. 30% of the households are now employed in Goodyear, which is good, and 70% of the commutes are getting somewhat shorter. People still feel that it's safe day and night. They have high confidence level in our police. If anywhere they don't, it's in the south. The biggest problems facing us are foreclosures and crime. And bringing higher education and building a library and opening that mall will help improve their quality of life. Residents' attitudes have basically improved since 2010. Answers appear to be economy-based. 1/3 of the citizens have contacted the city, and luckily our courteousness and timeliness have dramatically improved. More than half of the people think the city's done a good job balancing the budget. To be more livable, they'd like us to have more parks, recreation, jobs, and shopping. Residents are still very satisfied with city services. 94% is incredible, considering that we've had to cut some things. And they're most satisfied with our basic services, and we need to work on bringing jobs and the water quality. And services that are very important to them have been over the years is bringing senior services, after-school programs, and circulator buses when we have money someday. On the tax issue, they are willing to keep that half-cent sales tax on more than 3 years if that's what it's needed in order to maintain the service levels, but it still must go. Lowering the food tax is an option if you need to keep that the half-cent in place longer. On bulk trash, 78% want to go to once-a-month service. 85% of them are already using it monthly or less. And on the ballpark, half feel that they have a positive attitude towards quality of life, and more than half of them have attended spring training.
Questions from council?
Madam Mayor, if I could, what we will do is be bringing back to the council some suggested ways to start analyzing some of these figures, such as focus groups and things like that, to get at the question of the south area and things like that. So we will be bringing that forward.
All right, that'd be great.
No, just second that. That's what I was going to suggest. Find out why some of those differences between north, south, and center. So.
And I will be getting you a complete chart on that one, on the tax issue.
Okay. Any other questions? Paula, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. All right, next item is the city staff will review the first quarter financial report. Terry Canada.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll try and keep this brief. You all got the full report in your packet for tonight's meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on that. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and just briefly touch on some of the highlights. I'll talk about the major funds or major revenues within the general fund, and then expenditures by category. A few of the budget trends that we're seeing moving into putting together, managing this year and then putting together the 13 budget. Briefly discuss operating funds for enterprise, a little bit on the revenues and expenditures, and then give you an opportunity if you had any questions on the budget transfers that will be included in the first, the consent item in the regular meeting tonight. With this, I'm just going to say the general fund revenues, as we talk through them here real briefly, they are trended. And so what that means is we don't just take the total budget for revenues and divide it by 4 and then look at a quarter of the year. They are trended out. A number of them don't always come in equal, and so we've taken that into account. Sure. Right now, we're at about 107% for that trended average for first quarter. There's a couple anomalies that are in there, but overall we think we're going to trend a little bit above average for year end. There's, I think, a use tax payment, and some of the community development revenues are up. Personnel, contractual commodities, as you can see, overall the average is 19%. We would expect to see right around 25% for full quarter expense. We do run a little low on commodities, and it's just slow purchasing in the beginning of the year.
Terry, real quick on that back slide, just one back on there. Does that include the construction sales tax and that general fund revenue?
Yes, it does.
All right. In the future, I know I had mentioned this. Is it possible when you're putting together the general fund, put a separate line in there for the construction sales tax? Gets a better flavor for operating versus non-operating revenue.
Okay, and here, Jim, let's see if this works. Councilman Pizzillo, if I just go ahead and break it here out of the sales tax and make a category there, is that going to provide enough detail for you?
That's fine. What I'd like to try to look when I compare those is operating revenue, on what it's trending. Because construction sales tax we use for one-time money, so it gets me a better flavor when I can see operating as a picture.
Okay, so break it out of the 61?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then again, I'll just do that for a trend too, because there's, somewhat seasonality to that too.
Okay, thank you.
Terry, we'd spent a great deal of time at the Citizen Budget Committee talking about the quote-unquote run rate. I don't know if you recall that
I am very familiar with it.
conversation. And part of what you were talking about when you referred to your trending, I'm assuming that since we stuck to just very general categories, personnel services, contractual, commodity, that we should theoretically at this point be looking at 25% in either one of those categories. Is that correct? So we're running.
Generally
our
speaking,
run rates.
yes, but it's early in the year, so.
No, and believe me, that part I understand because there's things that we do later in the year that we don't do in the beginning.
But generally speaking, yeah.
Okay, so we looked at that run rate issue and said if we were to take it from that point in time in March or April, that we would actually have ended up budgeting more than we were going to use. And this paints a very similar picture, I realize, 1 quarter in. Have we looked at that from 09 to 10, 11, and then 11, 12 to see how those compare?
We do that on a quarterly basis. We do the year-to-year comparative when we put together the base budget. And then we do quarterly expenditure reviews, which we've already done based on this data here. What you're seeing here, and I'll get a little bit more into it, detailed by the expenditures, you just see a lag because we're paying all the bills for the prior year, and that happens in July. Then they have to go through purchasing, and so there's just a delay in kind of the process of getting things picked back up for the beginning of the year. The payroll, again, that'll run, it just depends. We run we run 26 payrolls, and that will fluctuate just depending on where we're at in the year, because some months will have 3 payrolls and some will have 2. So that, although it looks like there could be a savings there, we're actually only at 6 of the 26 payrolls, so it is running a little, the percent would be a little bit lower than 25%.
So a run rate analysis, if I can just use that word in quotations, really looks better and a little bit more accurate done after the third quarter than it does after the first quarter. It comes with a little bit more accuracy. Is that a fair statement?
When you're looking at the run rate, what we're doing is comparative analysis month by month to see how they're spending year to year for that month.
Okay.
And so a great example of that is in parks. If you look at their bills for July, and a lot of it is water, you're going to see it's traditionally much, much higher than it is in October. And so that's what we're trying to pick up on, is what did they normally spend within that month. And again, overall, the spending is just slower in the beginning of the year. But like I said, we're looking at month to month, and then toward the year end to see what percentage they are in comparison to 100%.
Okay.
And I think last year, I think we were up at, in the high 90s, of percent spent to budget. So again, it kind of catches up as the year goes on. And I'll do these every quarter, so we'll come back and we'll report in January, maybe early February, how we did it half a year. And you'll begin to see the pattern of expenses pick up. And that's what we compare in the run rate. And we still do the run rates.
And just to add to the personnel, you should always have some savings in personnel, because when you budget at the beginning of the year, you're budgeting all the employees you have as of July 1, and typically you have people coming and going, et cetera, so you don't want to budget a percentage of that because you don't know who's coming or going. So there's always going to be some savings depending on what your turnover rate happens to be in personnel. So that's all part of it too, from a budget standpoint.
Okay, so moving ahead again to the top 6 revenues for general fund. Property tax, again, that's really low. They come in, I believe, in November and May, and so we'll just monitor that. It normally comes in a little bit below budget, and we think that's due to foreclosures. Sales taxes, again, slightly over budget. There was a one-time use payment that was quite high for that. We're expecting that to be on budget or a little bit ahead. Again, the state shared are the next 3: urban revenue, auto lieu, and state shared sales tax. Generally, those are they're always estimates that come in from the state. We usually get them in March. They almost always run right on budget. So we'll just continue to monitor those. And then the positive one this time is development-related revenue. And although it looks like a great percent, I think what you're seeing here is the fallout of us reducing the budget so much based on trended actuals over the last years has just really plummeted. We're beginning to see that step up. So we'll bring that back again every quarter, and hopefully if there are any specific revenue items or development-related items that are being posted there, we can talk about them. But right now it's just general overall increase in activity. And just real briefly on the salaries, they total 68% of the budget. And again, like we talked about, 6 out of 26 payrolls, we're right on at 20%. Councilman Pizzillo, speaking to your comment, what we're seeing now is we're a lot tighter because we're having less turnover. We've had a couple big payouts. We have had some people that have been here a long time that have separated from the city, and so we're not seeing the savings that we had before. Contractual services, again, it's about 30% of the budget. Commodities are very low. We've done a good job at trimming that. We're right down to bare bones on there. And then total will be right around 20% for the first quarter.
Yes, I recall personnel services in I think it was 2008, was somewhere around 53, 54%. So if you're, at 67%?
68,
yeah, 67, 68, that tells me is you've been shrinking on the commodities and the other peripherals because personnel service has not gone up over time, not significantly. They've been frozen the last 4 years. So if that's not going up and that's a higher percentage, then that tells me the other pieces are coming down.
Yeah, the other thing that's going on here is that we've really cut back on one time. We really have. So all you're seeing here is what's necessary to run core operations. There's not a lot of consulting services. There's not a lot of one-time planning efforts going on or big projects. So it's pretty much down to bare bones. Again, with the revenues, just briefly, sales taxes up. Like I had mentioned, community development up 17% from the prior year. We'll go ahead and keep an eye on that. It does tend to dip during the Christmas and winter season. As the expenses go, it's a little light in first quarter. The vacancy rate was about 2%, which is pretty low. I think as when I did this report, as of month ending September, there was about 12 vacancies. We'll continue to look for budget savings, identify efficiencies. Real brief on the other funds, they're doing, right within the budget as we would expect. A couple of the HERF and water are over 100%. The other two are just slightly under, but all 4 of them tracking very well.
Could you explain why water resources is at 111% of budget and wastewater is at 96% of budget? Wouldn't equal amounts of gallons in versus gallons out? Shouldn't they run hand in hand or, very similar? Or is that a technical question, and can we ask the boys in the back to come up and explain it to me?
Probably the technical part of it, but the revenues, Councilman Gelser, the two aren't related. And so water is just for the sale of water, And then wastewater is going, obviously, the technical part that can get more into detail. What you're going to see here, too, is that the water use is going to be higher in the hotter months.
And so the water revenue is accounting for some of the hotter months, whereas the sewers, don't get charged for that.
Stable.
Okay, the sewer rate is based on January through March, whatever your lowest rate is, and then that's the rate for the entire year. So your sewer rate is going to remain. So the fact that it's even lower, I'm trying to figure out why. I understand we're using a lot more water in the summer, in June and July, to water the grass, and that makes. But why is the city getting the revenue for that? I mean, aren't we using the same amount of revenue, water, or do we, or is
No,
that just
that-
a transfer price?
Councilman Gelser, that's on the expenditure side.
Okay. all right.
The other thing you're seeing here is that, there's much more of a seasonal dip on water. You're going to find wastewater revenues go higher in the winter when we have the snowbirds come in and the, flux of population goes up. You're going to see the variable use on the wastewater go up then. And conversely, you'll see the water go down.
Okay.
And this is on the expenditure side. You can see that they're all running right around 20%. The streets is going to be a little bit low right now. The bulk of that whole budget is the overlay program, and I think that usually happens in the spring. Same thing with the stadium. I didn't even report on the revenues because most of that is going to be coming in through spring training, and so I'll pick that up either next quarter or the one after. But keep in mind, we do run the facility 300 some days a year, and so expenditures are running right on track to keep the fields open. Are there any questions on the expenditures or revenues for the other funds? And if not, we can talk about, again, the budget transfers are in the back of the full report. We do transfer funds and bring them for you for approval. Anything that goes between funds or between departments, or if we have capital items that require budget transfers.
Wally, you had a question?
Yeah, I just was going to tell you, I appreciate all this paper, but it's very difficult to find where you are talking about in your slide versus all this paper. So.
I can probably reference the page numbers on the next
it would help
presentation.
a little
Okay,
bit. Either that or give us your presentation that way.
we can do that too.
Yeah, because yeah.
Quick question, and I don't know, as a result of what Wally mentioned, whether we're there yet, but on page 18, when it talks about the expenses for the general fund, it has the salaries at 72%.
Right.
And we had mentioned earlier the 67. Was that a blended, the 67, an overall percentage of personnel cost versus the general fund at 72? I'm trying to get a flavor for.
What page, Joe?
We're on 18.
18.
Councilman Pizzo, I'll have to check the figures and let you know.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there's a difference as a percentage from the general fund versus the enterprise fund, and that 67 was a blended from the enterprise and the general. Because on 18 I mentioned 72%, so if you could let me know that, appreciate it.
18 of the report?
Yes, of
Yes,
the report.
and that would be that would be for enterprise only, and it should be specific to each fund. I'm not
Okay.
reading exactly where you're talking.
Well,
right now.
on 18 here, it says overall salaries represent 72% of the 54 million general fund operating budget.
The book.
This book here.
Oh, that's why. Yeah, I'll have to check it and get back with you.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no questions, that concludes the first quarter.
Any questions? Thank you.
Do you want to, I'd be happy to entertain the questions now on the transfers.
It'll save us effort later.
That is our intent.
It's a pretty simple one, and it's a two-pronged question. We have purchasing rules that require up to a certain dollar amount. The department head can sign off on it. Up to another dollar amount, it has to go out to bid, and then a greater dollar amount, it has to come before council. Speaking very generically about procurement, do we know what that has to go to council number is
On the budget side,
on the procurement side? Could be,
75,000.
500,000. You'll see 500,000 again,
oh, it's 500,000.
as far as a contract award.
Yeah. All right, here's where I was going with that. I thought that number was lower. It just seems to me that, like for tonight in the consent agenda, we have a whole list of budget transfers, and I get we're going to make little transfers here and there, but there are some pretty significant dollar amounts in these budget transfers for tonight that we just have, this 10-digit account number to this other 10-digit account number with a very generic, not even a complete sentence description that I would think would, and maybe this is that micromanaging thing we talked about last week, but I would think a little bit more definition might be helpful for us. If we have to, if it's coming to us to approve for a transfer, we probably ought to have a little bit more information, and we ought to pick whatever that dollar figure is. I don't want to know the $300 transfer and the $5,000 transfer, but I sure as heck would like to have a little discussion on the $75,000 transfer or the $150,000. So I'm going to kind of throw that out to, because that was my question on the
I don't think
consent.
it's unreasonable. I had the same feeling as I was reading these, that I would like it more defined. You're voting on something that you have a number, but you're really not sure what the number is being applied to. So-
We can certainly work on that for the next report, but for this evening, I don't think that's possible unless you have specific numbers that we can.
I don't know how it would be possible the way it is stated here at this time for you to go.
But we can sure work on a different method.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that? I mean, you're not assuming she can get, okay.
No, and I hate to say business as usual, but I understand this is the way we've been doing things for a long time. So I don't know that we need to change it for this action tonight. I'm certainly not suggesting
Well,
that.
it's public record, and it's nice when it's more understandable for everybody.
Right,
So-
and I don't know if the council, and I don't know if we, and obviously we can't make a decision tonight, but perhaps we can come up collectively what that dollar figure is that we want to hear a little bit more detail on. I mean, does everybody want to hear the $100 and $200 ones, or do we want to pick a number? Anything over X thousand is what we want to hear about.
Are you ready to answer that now, council? I would think not, but.
I don't know.
I
Let
would
us
think
make
not.
a suggestion
I would
to
think that
you.
to leave to staff, and could you, city manager, come up with a plan and a suggestion and how it would be best presented?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Is that agreed?
If I can offer on, if you want to go through the top 4 tonight quickly.
All right.
Maybe
Why
just
that would be great.
for a comfort level. And I notice in here there are a few, and there always will be in the first quarter of the year. We do the CIP carryover. That's probably the largest one of the night, and I can just take a minute to explain that. The first one is $1.3 million.
Page numbers.
Page number
This is on 24.
So this is your book.
Yes, the quarter.
They're different than the page numbers you.
Okay, I'm going with yours.
There's like 2 numbers on it.
Which page?
Well, he's saying it's 36 of the.
1.3? Is that what we're talking about?
Top of the page, on the
It's
right.
page 29.
29? No, we've got 36 here. Okay, I've got 29.
Well, yeah, but because there's an explanation on page 36 of what the 1.3 million is.
I think Terry, it'd be helpful if you could explain what a carryover is to the
Okay.
council.
Um,
Just a definition. What
I'll just
happens
go-
in
I
the
think-
budget process when it gets budgeted, and then how it gets reallocated out probably will help them.
Okay, and I'll just take, as an example, it's transfer number 12-0023, and it's the CIP project carryovers from the prior year. So what happens is at a point in time, March, April, we work with the project managers, and we try to determine how much of the CIP funding will not be spent during the current year and needs to be reappropriated, included for the budget for the following year. We go ahead and we continue with the projects and we spend through June 30th. All the bills are then collected for any work done through June 30, and they're paid for a couple more months. And so the bills are coming in, and they're processed in July and August, and then that gives us our actual June ending balance on the projects. Then we have to go back and adjust the current budget for that money that was spent. And so we're carrying over or adjusting the budgets to the exact amount of project funding that is available on June 30, given all the bills that have been paid. So this large transfer for $6.6 million, this is by individual account number, by project, and what you'll have transfers amounts from will probably be the project funds that were spent, the difference between what we budgeted and what is not available to carry over because we spent it. And then the same thing if we've underestimated and we have to increase the funding for the projects because they didn't spend the money.
I have a question. Are those numbers, the transfer from account number, does each number delineate a different project?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So there's no way we can tell where the projects are going from this?
They're going from the same projects. It's just the appropriation is changing between the year to account for what you spent to reduce or reflect that in the next year's budget.
Then why do they have so many different account numbers if they're not different projects?
Every segment of the account, whether it's design or it's construction or it depends on the type of projects within the fixed asset codes, all the ending numbers in 2 are services. All the 7s are capital system numbers. Each system is going to have a different number, whether it's water, wastewater, IT.
Can we get a code to these as we go through these? Because it's kind of hard to follow. It's just a bunch of numbers, and I'm just seeing, I don't know what the accounting numbers are for those.
I think that we could provide a summary that would just be more text in nature than the numbers, but give you the big numbers that say move project costs from here. Some of these roll back in, and so we've spent the money again in the prior year, and again we've got to reduce the budget to make sure we don't overspend. That will roll back into a contingency account that's not cash backed. That might be a better summary.
I'm just thinking, and I'll throw this out for the fellow council members, is like a journal entry. If there's like a text description, I think is probably what would help them.
Yeah, I think
just
so.
like when you do your debits and credits, you have a text description that says
Supplies,
this is what actually happened. Especially the big ones, I think that would be of great help to them because they're not going to know what account 001-1740 is, and probably won't understand how to get that unless you've been working with them. So, but a text description would get that.
That would be
Okay,
perfect.
we'll provide some type of summary along with this for approval within the consent
Yeah, I
agenda.
think-
Great, thank you.
Are there any other?
Any other?
That's, like I said, that was the biggest one. The first one was just moving a division to a different fund, and again, we do it between funds, departments, or projects, and so that's why it's brought to you. And again, there are a number of them that are in here, again, that are related to last year and carrying over money that are just to more accurately reflect what was available at year end. Okay, are there any more specific questions or?
Any more questions from the council? All right.
I have one quick one, and I just saw it twice, and it may have answered. It's just because I see 2 that are overtime, standby, on time, and call. Yeah, are they different departments? That might be the code. That since I don't know the code, 0033, and then there was another one.
Yes, Councilmember Loretano, those are one is for water and the other one is for wastewater.
Okay.
And it's to reallocate the funding that they have to the appropriate line for on-call, standby, and call-out pay, I believe.
Okay.
And they had a change between the time we adopted the budget and, we did the base budget. They had a recommended amount from the year before, and they just reallocated between the line items to get that in a more appropriate place of where it was being spent. So it was within the fund.
Any other questions? Thank you, Terry. We're going to adjourn this meeting. Before I do, we'll take a break. So, 5 minutes, is that enough, or do you want a 10-minute? I'm gonna,
10's good.
10's good, all right. This meeting's adjourned. We'll take a 10-minute break before the next meeting.
So I know you're ignoring it, but in the truth,
Are you kidding me?
Okay. I'd like to call order the Monday, December 12th council meeting, and if you'd all please stand for the